Hello, hello, this is Serena, and we are playing Creativerse Gone Wired. This video is the second in a series of step-by-step tutorials that assume no previous experience with circuitry, virtual or otherwise. Last time we learned a little vocabulary, got a good look at our wiring tool, and played with switches and plates. Today we'll figure out how to work LEDs and inverter gates, and even build our first complex machine. But first, let's talk about two different kinds of color mixing: light versus paint. How light mixes color and how paint mixes color are not the same. Light's primary colors, in contrast to paint primary colors, are red, green, and blue, and mixing them gives us light's secondary colors, yellow, cyan, and magenta. Creativerse's LED blocks follow this red, green, blue pattern of mixing light. So do lights and beacons, sometimes to a lesser extent. So do the color screens of electronic devices, if we look closely enough. A full explanation of the light spectrum and how we perceive color is beyond the scope of this video, but I've included links to other videos and sources in the description. And if you would like to discover more on your own, look up the terms RGB color model and additive color. And here we go. Let's work on some LEDs. Looking at the LED, it has several different variables. Of course, a receives input. It connects just like lights. It has a can interact button, so if we uncheck this, we can not be able to turn it on and off. In fact, let's go ahead and test now. Interactable. You can turn it off and on like a light or a door. If I uncheck that, this device is locked. Here's our red, green, and blue section we were talking about. Red, green, blue, and these sliders are all the way up. You'll notice the highest number we can get to is 255. We'll actually come back to visit this number. It's a very important number in computing, and we will actually make this number in binary later on. But for now, it's enough to know that 255 is the highest you can go. The lowest you can go is 0, of course, which gives you black. That is actually on. So you see the LED has a semi-reflective surface. It actually shows light, this being daylight. There's light on top and light on the eastern facing side because it is morning. And when you turn a black light on, it actually becomes a completely solid black color. This is one of the few ways that LED will not act like a light at all. You may also notice in dark areas that it will not shine any light, it will not have a glow, but it will allow light to pass through it. Looking back at our sliders, we can go all the way up on red, all the way up on green, and all the way up on blue. If we go part way up, let's do 100. Might be easier to type it in. We get a shade of gray. So 3 zeros, black, 255 all the way across white, and as long as the numbers are the same, we get any shade of gray in between. It's still quite dark. Let's look at our primary colors. Remember, this is primary for light, so red is going to be all the way up. Green is going to be all the way up with red and blue at 0. and blue all the way up at 255 with red and green at 0. What about for numbers in between? Red with 255 and green with 255? Yellow. You may also notice in the information pane of our wiring tool, when you hover over a block, it shows you the red, green, and blue numbers with R, G, and B, and even shows you what color it is in the text itself. It can sometimes be hard to see against certain backgrounds. Blue. So what's in between green and blue? Cyan. And finally, with blue and red all the way up, we have magenta. Of course, these are the primary and secondary light colors, but there's a lot of colors in between that we're missing. I know a big one that we're all familiar with is orange. Where does it go? And magenta is pretty, but it doesn't quite feel like purple, does it? Here's our 6 colors, with some extra space for orange and purple. Red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. Let's make this white a color orange. So we know we have red, and we have yellow, so it must be in between red and yellow. Maybe there? I like that. It's a little bit on the red side. You'll notice looking at the LEDs, they kind of have their own texture, even though they are generally a flat face. This one has a bit of red more along its outside, with more brightness in the middle. Let's see, let's bring this up to out there. That's more of an in-between color. That'll do for orange. How about purple? Well, we know magenta is red and blue, so we probably want to move from here. Maybe, whoops, here? Not bad. Here you can really see the texture. There's almost a huge difference between the blue along the outside and a stronger magenta color in the middle. Let's tweak it a little bit more. Maybe it should go closer to a grayish color, so we'll bring our blue down as well. Remember, the lower down all numbers are, the darker the block is going to be entirely. And adjust the red some more. That looks much better. Much more like a purple. If the sliders themselves are too daunting or difficult, they can be kind of fidgety and hard to pick out. Or you know exactly what color you want and you would just like to be able to type in the numbers right away, you can look online. Cloford.com's 500 plus colors has a whole listing of different shades, as well as the RGB codes that go with them. You can even look up specific colors on Wikipedia, and Wikipedia as well has the RGB codes. They even have extra ones for print versus what you might see on the screen. So I wanted to do this part at night, not only for a change of scenery, but just to get a good look at the LEDs at night. This is our 100, 100, 100 gray. As I mentioned before, they don't put off a colored glow, but they do have a lovely neon color. As you can see, the primaries and secondaries are a nice solid color, but you can really kind of see that texturing or mixing happening with the two off colors. Just something to keep in mind. We need to play with our inverters. I already have two LEDs set up for us over here. An inverter, as you might guess by the name, takes a signal and turns it to its opposite. So far we know signals can be true, which is like on or open, or they can be false, which is like off or closed. So this inverter will take any signal we put in it and switch it to its opposite. It has an input and an output and a CAN interact. And we're going to connect it to a switch and our lights on either side. So this switch will be connected directly to this light. And let's go ahead and color our lights. Since we're working with an inverter, why don't we take a color and its inversion? Which color should I do? Blue is so strong. It's actually very dark for being a solid color. Let's see how it looks on the wall. Nice. So blue, that's 0, 0, 255. So how about 255, 255, 0? In the RGB format, the opposite of blue is yellow. Let's hook up our inverter. And you should probably notice something right away that's a little off. Well, obviously our switch is off, and the switch connected to this light should be off. Switch is off, it sends a false output to the inverter, and the inverter takes a false output and switches it to true, and you can see the inverter state says true. The inverter is connected to this light, but the light is off. The light is false. One thing to keep in mind when you place inverters is when you first place and first connect, they're probably not going to work. You gotta kind of jiggle it a little bit with the signal. On, off. Now it's working. Our switch is off, the inverter changes it to a true output, and we have light on our yellow LED. Let's have a little more fun with it. We need to play with delays again. Let's set our delay for 4 seconds. Just enough time to see everything that's going on. Delay gets a signal from somewhere, sends a signal to the inverter. The inverter changes the signal and sends it back to the delay. And let's go ahead and have the inverter attached to our LED. The inverter doesn't work right away, we know from messing with that, so we need to toggle it a little bit, kind of jiggle the handle on it with a switch. Four seconds off, 4 seconds on. It takes the time to pass through the delay, sends it back to the inverter, which tosses it back to the delay, and the delay counts down again. We now have a cycle, and the cycle is perpetual. Leaving the area and returning, it will still go. Logging out and logging back in, it will still be running. Why don't we change it up a little bit and make this point, there we go, 0.5. Now it should be counting down about 1 second. every 1 second it lights. We now have a nice little digital clock. 1 second clock, but still. I think we can use something like this over here with a red, green, and blue beacon. But it might be more complex than just that one block. After all, that's one LED and these are 3 beacons. Since we're going to be doing something a little more complex, let's try writing it down first. So we know we have a red, green, and blue beacon to work with. Since I'm working with light, and I know these are my 3 primary colors, and there are 3 secondary colors, I'm thinking I would like them to overlap to make the other colors. Like you can do with beacons normally, only this time they're going to be powered by machines, and they'll cycle through. So there'll be the red and green will overlap, and then just the green, and the green and blue will overlap, and then just the blue and the blue and red. Think we can do it? We need to know our desired results, so what color we want to come out of the top, and each time it changes, a second should pass, so we'll know how long this will take, well, how long the full cycle will take. We're using our 6 colors, our primaries and our secondaries from light, and we want red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, magenta. 6 colors, so 6 seconds total. For red, we want the red beacon on, but the green and blue beacon off. For yellow, we want the red and green beacon on, but the blue beacon off. For green, we want just the green beacon on, and red and blue off. For cyan, green and blue. For blue, just blue. And finally for magenta, we want red and blue to be on, and green to be off. Can you see the pattern? Let's highlight it a bit. If we wrap around the top one, we get this nice cycle where we see 3 seconds on and 3 seconds off for each color, for each beacon. And there's a point where each one overlaps as well. At yellow, the green and blue overlap. At cyan, the green and blue overlap. And at magenta, the red and blue overlap. I'd like to start my machine with the red beacon first lighting up. Right now, the way we're looking at this, the red beacon starts in the middle of its cycle. So let's start here, and let's change our numbers at the top. So our first second starts when the red beacon begins. Better. Alright. Count down the seconds. We're going through the cycle. First second happens, second second happens. After the second second has passed, the signal goes to the green. The signal also continues with the red, so the next second, number 3, red and green will both go. Red stops, green continues for another second, and there, after the 4th second, it needs to send the signal to blue. Green continues for another second, blue goes for a second, blue goes another second, so now 6 seconds have passed, and then maybe the signal shoots back up to red. So what I'm seeing here is that for each beacon, red, green, blue, it is on for 3 seconds and it's off for 3 seconds. And the important thing to take from what we're looking at right now is that each beacon starts 2 seconds after the previous beacon. I think we can use some delays to make this happen. Let's go try it out. Alright, let's see if we can do this. Sometimes if I know if I'm working with something that's a little bit complex or difficult, sometimes I'll start at the end and work my way backwards. So let's see. We know we want the blue light on 2 seconds after the green one. So let's go ahead and set this up. 2 seconds. So the green one needs an input. And the green one will be on 2 seconds after the red. So it also gets a delay of 2 seconds. Just for good measure, because we've already put a couple things up here. We're just going to test it real quick, what we've got so far. 2 seconds, it lights. 2 seconds later. Oh, did I not hook this up? Oh. Okay, that's right. I had my wires crossed, and that's why we always check. Always, always, always check. All right, here we go. Why aren't you? Ah, there we go. Okay, so I must have just had my wires crossed here. But again, that's why we check along the way, even before we finish the whole thing. That's off 2 seconds, that's off 2 seconds. So we assume a signal goes through. 2 seconds later. Okay, looks good so far. Okay, now, green goes on 2 seconds after it receives a signal from the red. We're going to make the red our kind of base or core, and it's the one that's going to tell the whole thing it needs to run 3 seconds at a time. So this delay will actually run 3 seconds. Let's test it. Two, three, on. 2 seconds later, green. 2 seconds later, blue. Of course, now it also has to go off 3 seconds. How's it going to go on for 3 seconds and off for 3 seconds? With an inverter cycled into our delay. Oh, that makes me dizzy. Whoops. Rendering error. So we're going to use our, enough of that, our inverter. And just like we did over there, we're going to make a feedback from the inverter back to the delay. So the inverter doesn't put out on its own correctly. We have to trigger it. Ooh. That's right. All right, so let's go ahead and test it anyway, just in case. Is it working? I think it's working. red, yellow, green, cyan, blue-ish, magenta-ish. Do you see the issue? I think our machine is working very well, but there's something else going on here. Yep. The blue beacon is not blue. It's cyan. That also explains why it's really hard to get any kind of green color. You've got so much of all the colors pumping through it, making a white light. So that's why we have two shades of cyan running through, and our magenta is whiter than it should be. But you know what? This is okay. Beacons and wood-burning lamps may be limited in their color, but we have a working machine here. We planned it out, and it works the way we planned. And to tell you the truth, I actually logged off after I had made this. That beacon is going to keep going even after I log off and log back on. We made a successful machine, and even if we have to make something more complex in the future to kind of adjust the color the way we want, we did this. And that's something we can definitely be proud of. I do see one other problem with it. Yep. I like our machine, but it is perpetual. It does keep going. I have no way to turn this off. Yet. In our next video, we'll see how logic gates can be a great tool for dealing with multiple wireable blocks at once, and we'll practice a couple of troubleshooting techniques when making larger machines. Let me know if these videos have been helpful to you in some way with a like and a comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.